Hi, and welcome to the Kale Houser Leadership Secrets podcast. Today we are going to talk about implementing change in your organization. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Kale Houser Leadership Secrets podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. Something came up yesterday, actually, with a friend of mine that had me thinking a lot about this process. And if you haven't figured out by now, a lot of my podcasts are a little bit on the reactionary side. And as that something comes up that I find interesting or I think is applicable to you guys to hear about and think about in your own business and own lives, then I'm going to talk about it, which is kind of the great thing. You know, this allows me the flexibility to kind of bounce around and hit hot topics as they come up. And this is certainly one of those things. But it overall plays into your business as a whole, because I want to talk about implementing change. Now, change could be a variety of things, right? That's the definition of change. It's something old and you're going to something new. You're doing something different. And in business, when we're talking about this typically falls under the realm of a new policy, a change in how you do business with your customers and clients. This could be the way that you train people in your organization, how you hire people, and even maybe a change to your pay scale or how you compensate your people that work for you. And all of these things can cause pain, right? They can cause a little bit of thrash in your organization. And I wanted to talk about this because this came up recently with a friend of mine who kind of hit me up of, he's going through this right now. He's experiencing the results of the change that this company implemented. So and this specifically had to do with I guess it would fall under their training program. And before, it was a very simple process. You popped in, popped out, did your couple tasks that you had to do, and pending external uncontrollable factors, you were usually in and out within a day or two. But this company has implemented a new policy, and I was able to see how they implemented the policy, and I got to say I disagree with how it was implemented, but they implemented a new policy to create a much more robust training program, right? And you can certainly see, especially when it comes to training, reasons why a company would do that. Maybe they saw a shortfall somewhere, things down the line have kind of highlighted themselves as, hey, maybe our training isn't quite satisfactory or isn't complete enough in order to set our people up for success, right? So when it comes to training, certainly you can understand, and you may have gone through this yourself. You've recognized a shortfall in the competency level of your people. So you're like, man, maybe we need some additional training, okay? And this is kind of where this company has been at. But they went, I don't know if extreme is the word for it, because I wouldn't call it extreme, but I would definitely call it more robust, okay? And that just means more time away from family in this instance to accomplish these training tasks, and just more involved overall. Now, on the surface, not a bad thing, excuse me. But when you start looking at it as a whole picture, you have to step back and this is a larger organization, right? We've got, I guess probably around 100-ish people that are in this particular section of this company, but overall part of a large company. How it was implemented was purely by email. Okay, there was no buy-in achieved. There was no nothing. And let me step back a little bit before we go down that path, right? So as a business owner, there will always be an occasion, if you are growing, if you are interested in expanding your business, if you are interested in growing your teams, if you're interested in more revenue, right? New markets, things like that, there will always be an occasion where your old policies or your existing policies will need to change. Your SOPs may not fit as you've increased your client load tenfold, right? Or increased your employee base tenfold. Your old way of doing things just aren't going to work. And now, whether that's by a reaction to something that happened, whether external or internal, or by intention as you are choosing a path to go down and grow and change or whatever that is for your business, you should be you should be implementing these new policies and procedures in order to match that, in order to set your business and yourself up for success and your employees, right? So like I said, that can be in all kinds of different realms, whether it be training or hiring process or customer reactions, how you the life cycle of a product that whether you develop and create and advertise to market and all those things. And it could be something as simple as like travel or, again, there's thousands and thousands of different ways that this can manifest itself, just depending on your business. And you certainly know those better than I do for your particular situation. But think through those things of, as if you were to have a 10% increase in your client base right now or your revenue, what would that mean for your business of things you would have to change in order to satisfactorily serve that and set everything up for success, right? That could be all kinds of different things, both big and small. But the real trick is, how do you keep your existing people, how do you get them on board with this new idea? How do you involve them? And the real key about it is, you as the leader, again, this is your responsibility. You're the business owner. You're the one in charge of that department. You need to sell it to them. Okay, you are at this point, you are a salesman. At this point, you need to convince them that this is for the overall good, because you've gone through a thought process and you've weighed options and you've decided on this between the good and the bad, and sometimes just the least worse, right? If that's the way you say that, this is the right course of action for your business in order to be successful, to match that need or to meet that need that you see coming down the road. But you have to sell it. You can't just make this assumption that because you've come down on high and implemented this new policy in paragraph 2.3 of your employee handbook, that everyone's going to be, sweet, yeah, I'm so excited about this, and they're going to be on board. That's just not how people work if you haven't figured this out yet. And this is really the difference. This is what comes down to the difference between a commander and a leader. Okay, let me say that again. This is what separates the commanders from the leaders. And certainly, if you haven't kind of picked up on my strong feelings on the difference between the two, based on my experience, let me recap. A commander dictates. A commander feels, most often, right, a pure commander that's not also a leader. A commander goes, this is my authority. I have every right to do so, as imparted me by my organization or by my position, and this is the way it's going to be, right? If you don't like it, either I'm going to punish you or we can separate ways, whatever that is for you. But a leader actually gains that buy-in from their team. They involve them in the process as they can. Certainly if you're part of a larger organization, you can't have a, 200 plus person meeting and say, hey, everybody, we've got to decide on the compensation plan and get everyone's input. That's how Congress works. And that's why it doesn't work, is because there's just too many people, right? But certainly if you've come up with that, as part of your management team and your upper echelon of whatever that organization looks like for you, and then you I almost said pawn it off, but you're not pawning it off. You're selling it to your workforce. Okay, you've said, this is what's happening. This is why it's happening. This is how we're going to implement it. And this is why it's important to everybody, right? That's what a leader does. They show the way. They show the reason that they're going over there, whether, for future health, future benefits, or to avoid danger, whatever that case may be. Because you may be changing policies in reaction to a marketplace change that's dangerous, right? Certainly businesses had to do this during the COVID lockdowns because the way they had done business completely changed. And we saw probably, I don't have the stats, but probably thousands of businesses stopped being businesses because they could not adapt to these new environmental conditions, just with how things were running in different countries around the world. But the point of it is, you need to be intentional. You need to be explicit with your team of all the reasons, why you're making these changes and what the benefits are for them. It's no different than if you were to go to a car dealership, right? It's kind of the same principle. The salesman at the car dealership shows you like, hey, this is this feature. It's got 4 wheels. Oh, great. Well, what's the advantage of that? Well, you don't have to use your feet. It's got that engine, and you can push this gas pedal instead of being a Flintstones car and rolling yourself down the street. Well, what's the benefit? Oh, you don't have sore feet at the end, right? Like that's an extreme example, but you understand, like they're showing you these features and advantages and benefits of why this is a good thing for you. And you need to be the same for your people in these new policies and changes that you're implementing as you're doing them. There has to be a reason that it's good for them. There has to be a reason that it's a benefit for them. And again, this could be a carrot kind of situation, like, hey, if we go over here, we're going to get this awesome thing, whether that's more clients, increased revenue, whatever that may be for your business. Or it could be the stick, well, in this sense, the stick of, hey, we need to run away from this danger that's coming up on us over here. Like maybe there's a new competitor in your marketplace or something of that nature, and you need to be able to adapt to that. All right. So, and to do that, you have to put in new policies and procedures, and maybe, shrink down a little bit if that's your reaction to that scenario. Although I would argue that shrinking down is hardly ever an appropriate case in the business sense. All right, so yes, be intentional and explicit with your team as you make changes so that they understand why it's happening. You have to leave no room for assumptions on their part or misunderstandings on their part, okay? So to have this little story, quite a few years ago, my mom and I, as most sons and mothers, kind of butted heads at some point. We're both pretty strong personalities when it comes to each other. And my wife and I were living in Hawaii at the time. We were stationed in Hawaii. I was going to school, and they came out for a visit. And through some various previous experiences with my mother and how we had butted heads, and our personalities are, I would say they're different, but maybe they're so closely aligned that they clash with each other, right? It's like, are we really that different, or are we just so close to each other that we're clashing? But I made the conscious decision based on previous experiences with her and some of the hardships we had, that when they got out to Hawaii, because they were staying with us in our condo, so you've got that. We're both adults. I'd been married for, I think 10 years at that point. And, they, of course, are adults, my mom and dad, and, we're living in close proximity and all that good stuff. But I made that specific point of, when they got there, I sat my mom down. I think we were out for a walk, and we were sitting on a bench, it's a beautiful Hawaiian day. And I said, Mom, I want you to be here. Liz and I want you to be here. We are excited that you're here, right? Because in the past, there had been, I think, some assumptions made based on how we had reacted to each other, that maybe we didn't want to be around each other, or we didn't enjoy each other's company, and all those types of things. But that was because we had left room for these assumptions to be made versus being very clear in our intentions and our actual feelings towards each other, right? And to be honest, that changed the entire dynamic of the visit. And it was one of the best visits, certainly up to that point, that we had had. Now, Mom, if you're listening to this, I always want you around. We absolutely disagree on many, many things. Our lives are very different, which is okay. But I do thank you for everything that you've taught me, and you helped make me the man I am today. So thank you very much, Mom. All right, so that was that little side note. But the point being, you have to remove the opportunity for wrong assumptions and misunderstandings, okay? Those will kill this process or what you're trying to do faster than anything else that you could be doing, right? Because when people make assumptions, are they making the assumptions on the positive? Like, oh, wow, he just said this and did this, and this is kind of difficult for me, but it's going to be awesome, right? Like, no, nobody does that. That is even when they say they're doing that, in the back of their brain, that's not how it works. There's always that creeping, nagging feeling of this is a bad, right? Danger, 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 fight or flight kind of response, because that's what we do as humans. We kind of most often assume the worst when we're left in that kind of unknown realm and things are changing and we're not exactly sure what's going on. Usually we tend to be extreme on the negative side of things, and we react poorly to that. And that creates that misunderstanding, and then people start, again, they're not part of this buy-in. All right, so you want to make sure you're leaving no room for that. And that means being intentional. So like, hey, everybody, you can't just do this in an email. And an email is a great way to lay it out, especially if there's technical aspects to these changes. So people can refer back to that, hey, yeah, we did update our employee handbook. Paragraph 2.3 now says this is our travel policy. You can no longer, whatever that is, we've removed the ability for you to claim your taxi ride to and from the airport, or, all those types of things. So there's a ton of different reasons, and certainly that happens often as changes, or we implemented a new travel credit card that you now must use as part of our company versus using your own rewards credit card. And people kind of get upset at that, because especially if it's a job that requires a lot of travel, they look forward to, that's one of those kind of fringe benefits, those extra benefits that they get to use by collecting Marriott points or United Airlines points by using their credit card that they've opened for that. But now that you've implemented this new travel card that's your corporate card, they don't get to use that anymore. They've lost out on those points with that credit card, right? And that's just a small example, but that's something that certainly happened to a lot of people in the corporate world, as these corporations realize, well, wait a minute, we could be getting these points and getting these discounts from Visa or whatever, Chase Bank, all those different things, and people get kind of upset about that sometimes. At least I did when it happened to me. But you want your people to be part of this process, and you want them to be a continued part of your team, and you need to be intentional of that. It's like, hey, especially if you've got a smaller team, like, hey, Jeff, I always use Jeff for an example. I wonder what's a good, and this isn't referring to Jeff Sorrow, my recent guest, but, hey, Rick, you're our outside sales guy. You are responsible for traveling. I understand you travel 200 days out of your year, going to see all of our clients around and keep up those customer relations and check in on their accounts and all that good stuff. But in order for us to be successful as a company, and we're growing, we're adding 3 more salesmen, I've, contacted, USAA, and they're going to give us a corporate credit card, and you need to use that for all of your business travel, your airline fees and your taxi fees, and your hotel fees, right? So pretty much anything other than food and your own personal expenses. This is, why we're doing this XYZ, and this is what it's going to mean for our company. But you need to go to him and say, hey, this is not a punishment. This isn't because of that. These are the advantages and benefits of it, and this is what it means for you as our outside salesman, and what that is going to do for you. And there may be some things, and you need to consider that, right? You need to consider that when you're making those changes, but you need to be able to explain to Rick why you're implementing this thing and get his buy-in and his understanding for that, okay? And that was kind of a simple example, but going back to this training example with my buddy, is there was none of that done. There was an email sent, said, okay, from now on, we're going to go to these extended training hours. You're going to have to do these additional X, Y, and Z's. You're going to be at least a week up on site in order to presumably go through all this stuff, pending outside external factors that will further delay you. But the reality is, it was put in place for presumably a good reason, right? Additional training is not usually ever a bad thing. But the reality is, as people are traveling in and out of the country and they're further away from their homes, and these are very experienced guys, they don't see the need for it, right? They don't see the overall picture, and they haven't been sold on that. Like, yeah, this may be an inconvenience to you in this specific instance. It causes you an extra couple days away from your family to do these additional hours of training and these additional events. But overall, right, this is going to mean for the company is that our customers are more satisfied. We can prove to them and show to them, like, hey, we do X amount of hours before we go on and to service these contracts, which makes us more safe and more qualified and more experienced, and all these different things that we can meet these customers' needs, which ultimately results in us getting more customers and more customer satisfaction, right? All those types of things that go into it, which I can see as somebody that's, kind of can step back and see the interplays of this and that thought process. But your average, quote unquote worker bee doesn't necessarily see those things. They only see what's in front of them and the impact that's happening. Okay. Well, I think I've espoused on that quite a bit. We're going a little bit long, but I wanted to make sure that you understood, as you are growing, if you are growing, you need to be making changes to your policies. Old things are not going to work in new arenas and new realms, right? If you had a $100,000 business, the things that got you to that $100,000 business are not going to get you to $1 million business or a 3 million. And same thing, the 3 million is not going to get you to 10. All those things have to change. And that a lot of time comes through growth. And I would encourage you to be intentional about those changes versus solely reactionary, because reactionary puts you in a bad spot, right? It's a reaction. You have to choose, X or Y right away, left or right, and you don't get a chance to process and analyze and realize, well, maybe there's a Z, maybe there's an up that I can go versus a left or a right. So if that's not part of your already kind of business plan and how you run your business, start thinking about growth and some of the challenges that you'll see. And this is certainly where a mentor comes in. I can absolutely help you with that, especially on the leadership side of things, is being able to have that foresight to see down the road, right? Because you don't know what you don't know, and that's almost always what's going to get you in the end. All right, that's enough on that. Hey, thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it. Kale at kalehouserleadership.com. Give me a follow on Instagram, Kale Houser. On Facebook, I think it's Kale Houser as well. TikTok, Kale Houser, at Kale Houser. All those things. LinkedIn, Kale Houser. Shoot me a like, shoot me a follow. I try to post some content on there, and the YouTube channel will be getting up and running here shortly. Hey, no matter where you are at in the world, have a fantastic afternoon. Bye.